It's 10 o'clock. Good evening. This is The World Tonight.
These floods are unprecedented in Iran's recent history. They're very intense.
Every year there are thousands of emergency room visits for heat-related illness. As we head into the summer months, doctors are urging everyone, especially the elderly, to stay cool.
A tropical cyclone Forni that is barreling towards its eastern coast, packing wind speeds of over 200 kilometers per hour.
Urban farming is common today, especially with the dwindling space for farming.
But it is the unique shape of the storm-resistant domes that give them their strength. A dome stands up to 200-mile-an-hour winds.
Cycling has increased a lot in cities. In order to keep walking and cycling routes cooler on hot summer days, many cities are planting more trees and opening new parks, which can help reduce peak temperatures by 1 to 5 degrees Celsius or 2 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit.
Please welcome back to the stage your Master of Ceremonies for the C40 World Mayors Summit, Connie Hedegaard.
Welcome back. I hope everybody had a good lunch. Welcome back to the main stage of the C40 World Mayors Summit. And hello again to our friends following online. We encourage you to join our lively conversation on social media by adding #TheFutureWeWant to your tweets and posts. I'd also like to encourage everyone to check out the newly launched C40 Knowledge Hub, an online platform with cutting-edge insights and practical resources from leading cities, and that is visit c40knowledgehub.org. Well, during the morning part of the program, we heard from our speakers that greenhouse gas emissions would need to peak in the cities would need to peak by next year and halve by 2030. However, at the same time, we must prepare for the climate impacts already affecting the world's cities by anticipating and reducing climate risks and building and investing in resilient infrastructure. And that is what this afternoon's plenary will be all about now. It's about adaptation to climate change. As we all know, the climate crisis already is having devastating consequences for many cities. Extreme high temperatures, coastal floodings, here blackouts, there droughts and food shortages. By 2050, 1.6 billion people will be exposed to extreme heat. 800 million will be exposed to coastal flooding and 650 million to droughts. That's the kind of consequences we are looking at. And that are staggering numbers. And impoverished populations are even more vulnerable to these impacts because they lack access to resources that could help them withstand extreme events. Our next speaker and moderator for the upcoming session is Minik Rosing, a professor of geology at University of Copenhagen. His research has focused on the origins of life on Earth. Actually, I think, Minik, what you really found out and what you are well acclaimed for is that you identified that the world was 300 or 400 million years older than we saw it before. That's what I call science. But Minik Rosing knows a lot about how life has impacted Earth's environment through geologic time, understanding the dynamics between life, rocks, atmosphere, and oceans is actually crucial for understanding the human impact on the environment today and to understand how we can hopefully avert collapse of the ecosystems that sustain our civilization. As a native of Greenland, Monique Rosing has also worked on how Greenland can engage in mitigating global problems while at the same time pursue harmonious development of Arctic societies. So, Monique Rosing, we are looking very much forward to your brief intervention and the following session that you will moderate. Please welcome Mr. Rosing.
Thank you very much, and I got the brief part. So, Excellencies, friends and colleagues, I'm deeply honored to speak to you today. There are no big cities in Greenland or in the Arctic altogether, so why would the Arctic be important to you? Well, all cities vitally depend on agriculture and fisheries in rural areas and on unmolested nature in the hinterlands. The global cities must collaborate with the global rural areas to avoid exploitative appropriation of communities and to support harmonious development and resilient rural communities so they can be attractive alternatives to city life. Every step towards improving the resilience of our cities must be taken in collaboration with the rural neighborhoods. Allow me to take you on a small trip to Greenland, which you see behind me. This summer, Greenland lost 500 billion tons of glacier ice. That is more than ever recorded before. So that is 500 cubic kilometers of water that will soon turn up on a coast near you. This is a chilling reminder that warming of the Arctic is happening at twice the rate of the global average. Concerned leaders from all over the world visit Greenland to see the glaciers melt and be awed by the rapid acceleration of climate change. No one can deny the profound changes in every aspect of the Arctic environment. A recent survey, Greenland Perspectives on Climate Change, 9 out of 10 residents of Greenland reported that they believe climate change is taking place, and 8 out of 10 reported that they experience climate change in their everyday life. So in Greenland, climate change is not a theoretical prediction of the future, it is the reality of the present. This has inspired the comparison of Greenland to the canary in the coal mine. However, I assure you that Greenland and the Arctic are much more than just a symptom of human error and a harbinger of pending catastrophes. The Arctic doesn't certainly not aspire to be a coal mine either. Greenland is not a symptom of global problems, it's an important part of a solution. Here's a couple of examples that would show how the Arctic can develop without repeating the mistakes that have brought us into our current crisis. Coastal cities across the globe will need immense volumes of aggregate, that is sand and gravel, for climate change adaptation. The Greenland glaciers produced vast amounts of sand and gravel, which is carried to the coast by meltwater. These deposits are continuously replenished with new material and could satisfy a large part of the global demand, while at the same time provide new opportunities for harmonious development of the Arctic region. Greenland holds unrealized hydropower potential of 17 terawatt-hours per year that could save the world 12 gigatons of CO2 emissions every year. The melting glaciers of Greenland deliver billions of tons of finely powdered minerals that could improve the quality of depleted soils in tropical and subtropical regions and provide more and better crops and draw down atmospheric CO2 at the same time. That could help alleviate global inequality and reduce the incentive for slashing and burning natural forests, and again, establish sustainable and meaningful business in Greenland. This is one way where we can partner beyond the public and the private, but actually partner directly with nature itself to make change in the global environment. When planning for resilient cities worldwide, let us use the climate imperative for a system change, not just to reduce our environmental footprint. There is no point in sustaining a dull and bleak world. We must use the climate crisis as an inspiration to make our cities more livable and more joyful, and to develop rural areas and make the world sustainably wonderful. So now I would like to transition into the next segment of our program, where I will moderate a dynamic, I hope, discussion between city leaders, representatives for the NGO community, and civil society. The discussion will be about key ways we can mobilize resources and build a resilient future for all people everywhere. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Cassia Moraes, founder and CEO of Youth Climate Leaders. So Cassia. And Marty Walsh, Mayor of Boston. Sheila Patel, Founder, Director, Society for Promotion of Area Resource Centers, SPARC. And Zaki Mohammed, Minister of State, Ministry of Manpower, Ministry of National Development, Singapore. So I think I will start with you, Marty. Boston has experienced severe snowstorms in January and the hottest weekends ever recorded. And you had coastal flooding in 2018. And when all these things happened, you actually already had a strategy called Climate Ready Boston. Yeah. So what is Boston now doing to prepare the citizens for the changing climate, and how have these events affected your goals and your ability to galvanize your community to prepare for these climate impacts?
Well, thank you. First of all, I think the fact that we're getting those storms are the same responses that people in Greenland had with their survey they did. We had a conversation over lunch, and we were talking about not everyone is quite in the same space as the 2,000 of us here in Copenhagen today, talking about the climate and the changes that we're seeing. And as you mentioned, we've seen the hottest summers on record. We've seen the coldest winters on record. We're seeing all kinds of different things happening in the past. We were prepared for those types of storms that came. Going forward, I think a couple things have to happen, and one of the things that we're doing now is we're planning out different areas of the city of Boston. We've broken the city of Boston into different neighborhoods, and we're having these planning conversations in the different neighborhoods about what the impacts of sea level rise might be. And we're using really sea level rise as an opportunity because we're a coastal town. We have 47 miles of coastline, and being able to point to certain times where the sea has come in, where the ocean has come into the different neighborhoods. And I think one is going to be educating people about it, and also really making sure that we have those plans moving forward. Those are a couple of things that we've been working on, but also we're looking at building out more parks in different spaces in our city so that we can make sure that areas stay cooler and there's places to go where you're not on the coast. And it really is going to come down to education. I think it is. I mean, I think I saw in Boston a couple weeks ago where young people, 7,000 of them, and to your credit, the young people are stepping up here in the world to really put this on the front page, in the front burner. And I think we have to do more to educate our people. And while we're doing that, is continue to be resilient, continue to build out a plan. We have which I'm sure I'll talk about a little bit longer, but we have 47 miles around the coast, obviously in Boston, one of the oldest cities in America. And we have a plan called Resilient Boston Harbor that actually protects the coastline and, more importantly, the people that live in that area, the people that work in that area, and also connects people back to the harbor, which we'll talk about later.
So you think that basic knowledge is the foundation you have to build the resilient city on?
Knowledge is important, but also having real strong plans and having real strong people. And we have an office, actually a whole cabinet inside City Hall in Boston, the Environment Cabinet, that we work on this all day long. And it's not just one simple solution. It's reducing carbon emissions, getting zero net buildings built, leading the way in the city. There's a whole host of different issues that's been talked about today that we're doing in the city. So it is engaging literally almost every aspect of life, every aspect of whether it's a private person, the private sector, or public buildings, plans, and resilient plans, building it into everything that we do in government.
And now let's turn to Singapore. So Zaki, what is the biggest climate threat facing Singapore today, and how has this influenced the kind of adaptation and resilience projects that the government is investing in your city?
Well, most people, when look at Singapore, think of us as an urban city with tall buildings and very developed public transport networks. But the reality is this, we are not immune to climate change. And in fact, for us, surprising to most, it's an existential issue. Because being a small city-state, low-lying island, you'd expect that if sea level rises, you may have whole of Singapore submerged and there's no more Singapore to talk about in years to come. So if you look at the IPCC report, if you predict a sea level rise of about 1 meter in the next 100 years, means in 2100, the impact to Singapore could be tremendous because 30% of our land are in low-lying areas. And for us, a 1 meter increase in sea levels, if you include high water tides, surges, rainfall, you will find that there is that risk that many parts of Singapore could go underwater. At the same time as well, if you look at how we structure our water supply, we do have water reservoirs and we have seawater into our reservoirs. That's it. You have, you will lose your water supply too. So to us, it's an existential issue that even the Prime Minister spent 1/3 of his National Day speech on climate adaptation to look at how Singapore needs to plan ahead and put in place measures such as coastal protection, looking at critical infrastructure and how we plan future developments such as airports, ports and so forth to be higher and above sea level to plan for the next 100 years. So we have a 2100 plan. So we hope, and we are putting in place a big budget of about $100 billion to put adaptation measures in place.
And the plans for preparing Singapore for climate change, do they also reach into the greater region? Because Singapore is obviously a very major city in a broad region that also are facing severe problems with climate change.
I think one of the things that we could do, because in terms of looking after our existence, is really research and development to some of these areas, because these are not well understood in terms of the impact of rain, water level, tides into coastal cities. And we hope that our experience and our research could go into learnings for others to also adapt. At the same time, I think it's great that you have platforms such as the C40, where cities with similar concerns could work together to see how best we can implement. I mean, for us, we estimated that this is going to be the cost, but you never know how fast or slow the water levels will rise. But this is our estimate at this point in time, and things could always change.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the cities, we oftentimes think about what we all see all the time, but of course the cities, as we all know, consist of many different communities and different social situations. So I think for both of you, how would you ensure that the people who are usually most susceptible to all these problems, the poor, the elderly, and so forth, that they are being taken especially care of in these climate adaptation strategies?
I think it's important to have them have people part of the conversation, and we are, particularly elderly, people of color, lower income folks, and also when we're building out some of the parks that we're doing and the different investments we're making, some of that goes towards the most vulnerable people as well. You can't ignore. We shouldn't ignore those people like that. I'll give you an example. In Boston, Resilient Boston Harbor, one of the areas. Or two of the areas that Resilient Boston Harbor protects is we have one of the largest housing developments for poor people in the city of Boston and South Boston. It's called the Mary Ellen McCormick Housing Development, and we have a plan to build out a berm in the South Boston waterfront to prevent the water from going in through a park into this neighborhood. On the other side of the city, we have what's called the 4-Point Channel. It's kind of the growing area in the city of Boston, if you will, down by Procter & Gamble and Gillette. It has a big footprint there. And we're building berms and seawalls there as well, or we're going to be building them in our plan. If we don't do anything, those two bodies of water meet. Yeah. When those two bodies of water meet, they go into the Mary Ellen McCormick Housing Development. They go into another housing development across the street, the Old Colony Housing Development, and then it runs down into Roxbury, the South End, parts of predominantly people of color areas that we have in the city of Boston, and a lot of people that are most vulnerable goes into those areas. So when we think about protecting the city, you have to think that way. But also, I think it's important to have those folks sitting at the table having conversations with us as well.
Well, Well, for us, I think in terms of the vulnerable, we're a bit fortunate in the sense that 80% of the population, from the lowest income to the upper middle incomes, live in public housing. So to some extent, we do have control in terms of how we plan the estates, where people live, and therefore we are able to influence that. But where we need to work a lot harder are areas in which we will have existential issues. So one aspect, as I mentioned, coastal protection. So today, the fact that the Prime Minister spent 1/3 of his speech on this, I think raised the alarm bells to the whole nation to say, yes, this is serious. Climate action needs to be taken seriously as well, and we are putting in a plan. And therefore, everyone needs to understand this. And I think the top thing, the main thing we've got to do is really put in governance into how we deal with climate action. So one, from an infrastructure perspective, we've got to make sure that drainage, critical infrastructure are protected so that public services, public works are always available to the masses. That's one. Two, I shared this with the Asian mayors yesterday, that surprisingly as well, most people may not necessarily notice this, but in Singapore, food security will be an issue too, because we import 90% of our food, and if you do have climate impact, we do need to make sure that food sources, food diversification, and even growing our own food. So we do have a plan to grow up to 30% of our food by 2030 for the purposes of food resilience. So that's something in Singapore you realize 50 years ago we became industrialized and we left agriculture behind. And today we're telling people, please make a U-turn and start thinking about urban farming too, because that's one area in which we think we can improve carbon emission and really be more sustainable. But over the long term, what's also important is making sure that your water supplies, your food supplies, and all the basic hygienes are well protected and made available. And you have to think for the long term. Otherwise, we would not be keeping the country available or in good place for the next generation. So we are thinking for the generations ahead.
I just want to add one thing. Zaki brought up a good point about the investment that's going to be made. We all have cards and sheets, and it talks about all the great things that we're doing in our cities, how we want green industries, net zero, carbon reduction, carbon free. And plans, and we're all doing plans. Most cities in this room have really ambitious plans. What we don't have is really ambitious goals of paying for those plans. Yeah. And I think that we need to make sure, at least in Boston, we've been able to put 10% this year. This year was the first year we did it. 10% of our capital spending towards resilient projects. But that's the tip of the iceberg. When we talk about these plans we have, they cost hundreds of millions, billions, and trillions of dollars worldwide. We really have to start thinking about this in a bit different place as far as investment, because the world, the earth, the environment can't wait. It's not going to wait 50 years for us to come let the funding catch up to what we want to do. So that's something I think that we have to do more of, finding funding sources and having our national governments. And as was mentioned earlier, Mike Bloomberg said it. Unfortunately, we have a president in the United States that doesn't believe in this, but we have a Congress that should, and we have a Senate that should, and should be making those larger investments now.
Good. Well, and we just touched upon. Yeah, I think that's. Thank you. And we just talked about social inequity and these issues that are clearly a part of this problem. So Sheila, it's not only an environmental and economic issue, but also, of course, a social issue. So how is Spark trying to help the most vulnerable communities become more climate resilient and also less vulnerable to climate change?
I always thank you. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm very inspired with all the things that you say. I've been doing this work for the last 40 years, and through the work of my colleagues and other friends, we now have a global network of slum dwellers called the Shack Dwellers International. We have almost 50 cities and 33 countries in which we work, but we have very few mayors and very few national governments that actually do what they say, which is to call poor people to the table to find solutions. So I've come here to make deals. I want to make deals. in all the global cities, all of you mayors from the south, you know that 30 to 65% of people in your cities live informally. We've inherited a land management system which makes it impossible for poor people to find access to secure land. And poor people have been facing tsunamis for the last 50 years because an eviction is not different from your house being broken by a cyclone or from flooding. And so they are most equipped and most welcoming of exploring solutions that work. And what our organization seeks to do is to create solid, aggregated, long-term organizations of poor people who want to be treated as partners. We don't want to be beneficiaries of some charity that the city will put for us. I want this attitude that you want to protect the big industry and you want to protect the community. That's a very important symbol in action. I was also very fortunate to be one of the commissioners on the Commission on Adaptation. I met so many amazing people there. But I think what we contributed to that process is the urgent need to bring adaptation to the forefront. Because when you put adaptation in the forefront, it gives every individual a chance to make choices of the changes that are needed. We can't only say that our mayors and our government has to produce the change. Every citizen must want to do something that is symbolic. And so what we're trying to do is to say, in a very strange way, that the things that poor people need, all the SDG goals, and what social justice wants to do in the climate change process all come together when you look at vulnerable poor people. And so I think it's important for our constituency and our people in our community say, okay, we don't have electricity today. Why should we first get coal-based electricity, then move to solar? Why can't we leapfrog? Why must we build houses with cement with such a big carbon footprint? Why doesn't the industry produce new forms of building materials so that you don't have to strip old houses down and build new ones? So there's a huge opportunity here, especially for all of us who live in the global south, to leapfrog in development and to not see climate change as a doom and gloom process, but an amazing opportunity to bring equity and justice and voice to people. So I feel that is really the discussion we should have.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I think it seems like most people agree with you on that point. So Kasia, as a young climate leader, so how do you think politicians today and young climate leaders together can help shape a better future?
Thank you, everyone. As Mayor Hidalgo, Greta, and others have said before, our house is on fire. And while I'm here, I can't help but to think that it's not a metaphor anymore. I remember a few months ago in August when the smoke from the Amazon, together with a cold front, made the day turn into evening in São Paulo. The signs are everywhere, and we cannot ignore them anymore. This year, more than any time before, young people have been heard and had been invited to global gatherings like this. And I think it's a good start, but what we advocate as youth climate leaders is that we have to be empowered and given opportunities to take action as key agents in the transition to more resilient societies. So we ask the mayors present here to include youth in the implementation plans that you are presenting today. Not only because we are nice and smart, but also because as the ones who will face the worst effects of climate change, we bring more ambitious proposals to the table. And for example, while government officials in Brazil talk about the intensification of livestock to curb climate change, we are creating new alternatives to meat, such as Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat. And I want to thank C40 for the catering. I think you are walking the talk. Thank you very much for that. And finally, also, to deliver the future we want, we need to train the younger generations with the professional skills that are needed for the new climate economy. All the professions of the future, they will be different from the ones I was trained when I was younger. So a good part of the adaptation plan is to ensure that young people have the skills they need to have like a career that is full of purpose, but also to be agents of the change we are looking for. In that way, we can transform a daunting challenge as the climate crisis into opportunities to include millions of young people in new climate careers.
Thank you. So I can't help wonder if this generational gap in understanding and willingness to act, if that is something that's a problem in its own right, or maybe, isn't it really about time that we erase that generational gap and everybody work together towards a better future?
Of course. It's not like a war between generations, but I feel like with these movements that are being led by young people in the last few years, we are bringing more urgency to the table. As I said, like we will see the impacts. A lot of people are changing their future plans. Like there is a Brazilian journalist that said that we are seeing the strength of the first generation without hope. And that's really true. Like I've been talking to young people worldwide, and they are scared about their future. So what we want to do is to help them to channel this energy into action, and you need us as well.
Thank you. See, now we are not very far from being thrown off the stage, so maybe we could just briefly, each of you, give a short vision of what would you think your city would look like for the next generation when, say, 30 years, 40 years, time, whatever. Yeah, sure. It's kind of not very...
Distance from the mouth? Yeah.
Hello, test? All right. 30 years from now, 2050, our goal is for carbon neutrality, being carbon neutral by 2050. So you're saying 50 years from now, right?
Yeah.
50 years from now. So we'll be 30 years beyond that as a city. Boston has been growing around 8,000 people a year growing into our city. We're at the highest population in 50 years right now in the city. We're heading towards, in the next 50 years, we'll probably be at maybe the highest population in the history of our city. We're adding about 20,000 new jobs. I think 50 years from now, Boston will have more green space. We will have, it'll be a cleaner city. I hope that the leaders and the young people at that time who will be the leaders will be able to explain to the younger generation the impacts that were made in 2019, 20, and 21, what happened in the world. I think that that's key. I think I'd like to see the United States back as a leader on environmental justice by the year 2080, I hope. I hope they're there by 2022. We'll see. We'll see. But I think that, green industry, green jobs, green technology will be the leader in the United States and in Boston, Massachusetts, as far as what our economy looks like. I think that all signs point to people living longer, healthier lives. We want to be able to see that in the city as well. So I think, to sum it up, I think the best way I can explain that 50 years from now is that the conversations that we're having today and the effort that's being put in by many of the incredible people, including our young people today in these efforts, it all doesn't go away. I hope that we can all look back and say that that was a generation, that was an amazing generation. And I hope that 50 years after that, people will look back and say that could have been the greatest generation that ever lived in society as a whole, because they didn't fight world wars, but they did protect and preserve our planet for forever.
I think that was a good one. And these have to be very brief.
Okay, I'm just going to do this. For me, I think before we get to that level, to that state, there will be that confluence, in fact, transition in which we will be working with the next generation. And I think the conversations have to start now in terms of what kind of future that we want. And it cannot just be governments trying to envision a future for the next generation. So I fully agree with Cassia that governments need to engage young more and paint that joint vision. But one thing that governments need to do today, and that's where we are very concerned as well in Singapore, is to ensure that the next generation is not emburdened by decisions made today that they could not unwind in future. And to me, that includes, as Mayor said earlier, financing, for example, because you put the next generation to debt, or you put them in a position that things that should have been done for 100 years are not done, then you realize that they are being emburdened with problems they can't solve or they can't finance. So we need to think about how we start making us more resource resilient, climate resilient, at the same time as well. When I say resource, I mean financial resilient as well. So today's spending has to take into account some of these, whether you use carbon tax, whether you use carbon tax be plowed back into moving the world towards moving the economy to be more energy efficient or resource efficient or carbon efficient. At the same time as well, put some measures in place and budgets in place to improve infrastructure, create resiliency. And thirdly, I think as a society, beyond policies, beyond infrastructure, I think we need to embrace that the world needs to be improved and we can do better, both as a people and as a government. So this is where I think the confluence between the generation of today and generation of tomorrow can do better in terms of the conversations that we have and painting that vision together.
Thank you. And again, we are running out of time. So.
Okay. I think we have a very short period of making tough choices. First of all the cities in the global south are going to grow exponentially. They're not only going to grow exponentially because of internal growth or migration in their own countries. We're going to face a much larger version of migration than what Europe and other northern countries have seen. And that's going to be fueled by climate change. So and most of them will end up living in informal settlements. So if we don't sort that problem out now, it's just going to get worse. The second very important thing is, we talked about youth. In most of the countries in the south, there is a huge percentage of people below the age of 25. So right now, our national governments talk about the youth dividend. I think it'll be a youth disaster if we don't do what you have talked about. Produce new, if you learn things that were good in the industrial age, they're not going to be functional now. So how are you going to transform technology, training, investments in order to make that change? And the last thing is that everybody talks about investment needed, but I think you have to start talking about the implications of not making those investments, because that loss will be 10 times more than the debt that you will incur today. So we have a big job ahead.
Okay, and Cassia, very briefly.
Thank you. Well, I come from São Paulo, one of the largest mega cities in the world, and it's estimated that São Paulo is already 2 degrees warmer than 50 years ago, so we are very vulnerable to climate change. And this will exacerbate extreme events such as floods, agriculture, have impacts in agriculture, and also in the poor communities. And deforestation in the Amazon might make everything worse, as much of our rain comes from Amazonian flying rivers. In a nutshell, if the Amazon becomes a savanna, São Paulo is likely to become a desert. However, the future I want to build with fellow Brazilians is radically different. I dream of a greater, greener, resilient, and more just city, empowered 100% by green energy, with clean rivers, green space, and health and sustainable food for everyone. Oftentimes, we as young people are dismissed as being too idealist, but the truth is that we cannot afford not to change the world in order to secure a thriving future. So next year, in 2020, we are going to celebrate 50 years of the Earth Day So I hope that I can, by 2070, when we celebrate 100 years, that will be really a celebration, and that we will be together, maybe some of us will, celebrating what we achieved, and we made the world better than it was coming from.
Thank you very much. So join me in a applause. Thank you. So join me in an applause for Kasia Moraes, Sheila Patel, Saki Mohammed, and Marty Walsh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Good job. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's great. Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you to our panel. Thank you to Minik and team. And we will continue in the same vein as a natural follow-up. We will now have a series of 3 short presentations that showcase specific, innovative, and successful examples of adaptation. Our first spotlight is on one of the world's most iconic cities, where ancient civilization intersects with a modern cosmopolis. I'm naturally talking about Roma, and I'm pleased to introduce the city's mayor since 2016, Virginia Racchi, who is committed to make the Eternal City greener, healthier, and more prosperous. You have 5 minutes for your pitch. Welcome, Mayor. I don't know if this works.
So, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank all the organizing committee of the C40 World Mayors Summit 2019, either those who are present and those who have worked for the realization of this important event. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you and represent Rome, the capital city of Italy, to discuss what concerns us the most: the future of our house, the future of our planet, the future of our children. Yes, because the topics that we're dealing with today are not theoretical, as someone may think. The struggle against climate changes for the protection of the environment, development of a new shared vision in terms of reducing CO2 emission are the priorities that our children are asking us to face now. Our children, the million of citizens of tomorrow who are protesting around the world, inspired by Greta Thunberg. Our children, the adults of tomorrow, are taking action now. And let me tell you, this is something that I've never seen before. I mean, young kids, teenagers, facing and dealing with such a big issue, complicated issue, but they were going to make it, and I think we must help them. This is our duty. So in June 2018, Rome approved the resilience strategy. It is the first Italian city to have a real and solid plan of action to prevent the risk related to climate changes and to react with effective action to face the crisis. Within the strategy, we have included sustainable shared and public mobility, banning diesel emission, protection of natural resources by enhancing existing ecological networks, and promoting urban regeneration projects, implementation of inclusive and supportive policies. And I would not mention, but I'm doing, all the things related to this, like some that I called tiny and small leaders, who, when we talk about inclusive policies, they always think about threaten that migration or refugees may take. Well, this is not what we're talking about. We have to switch every issue into an opportunity. And this is what we have to do as a mayor. So, and we have to find the new business, a new opportunity, like in the new Green Deal economy. Let me tell you, one project that I'm very proud of is the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan we did together with citizens. And when citizens are free to ask what they want, they ask for something that protects their environment, the territory that they live in. In this plan, they ask for alternative forms of mobility, including environmental and pedestrian blocks or streets, areas with slow mobility, the improvement of tram, buses, and metro network, more bike lanes, more pedestrian lanes, all in a 10-year plan. So this is what citizens ask. At the same time, we're reducing and banning diesel. In a couple of weeks, I'd say from next 1st November, we're going to ban diesel from the Rome city center. It's an area about 48 square kilometers. And I know some citizens will protest, but this is what we must do. And I think as a mayor, you understand that it's not the time anymore to do what people like. Now it's time to do what is need to be done. And so, then about the urban agenda, we create Reinventiamo Roma within the framework of Reinventing City. We are setting basic criteria for regeneration, wide and abandoned buildings, like carbon-free, zero-emission buildings, and multi-purpose building. We want public and shared places as a main function of this area, so where people can get together, know each other, and maybe try to rebuild a new community, what in the biggest city is too often not present anymore. So we have to do all this, managing, as Connie said before, a city that preserves a lot of antiquities, and we have all the history, 2,000 years of history. So you can understand how hard it is for us to try to transform our city when every time we dig, even for 10 centimeters, we found magnificent Roman villas, or so this is a very interesting challenge in between the new transforming works that need to be done, and another issue that we have to protect our identity and our history. So it's not easy, but we're going to make it, because as Pope Francis said, this is the only home that we have. And it's up to us, the changing is up to us, and we have to do whatever we can to protect our home. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thought when I heard that you are actually banning diesel cars from next November, it was okay to give you 1 additional minute. So thank you so much, and good luck with continuing to do sometimes what people do not like. Thank you so much to Mayor Raggi. Our next spotlight is on the city of Hong Kong, where Mr. Wong Kam Sing has been Secretary for the Environment since 2012. As an architect by profession, he has been promoting the sustainable built environment since the 1990s. And during his tenure as the Secretary for the Environment, Wong Kam Sing has launched a number of key environmental policies for Hong Kong. Mr. Secretary, we are keen to listen to your pitch. Please, you have the floor.
Mayors, dear friends, this is Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a high-density city with many population, many buildings. So that's why you can see that Hong Kong the majority of areas look like this because we are conserving about 75% of Hong Kong's land as countryside and protected country parks. Hong Kong's urban areas are mostly concentrated at the area we call the metropolitan area, between steep mountains and the harbor, Victoria Harbor. The urban area like a ribbon around the bottom part of the mountain. It's good to have a compact city, but there are issues. Particularly, Hong Kong is one of the cities in the Pacific Rim with the highest level of rainfall. The average annual rainfall is about 2,400 mm. That means taller than me. 4 times of that in Copenhagen. And on top of that, when it rains, the runoff from the mountain, steep mountains, could run quickly downhill and get to the urban area and then into the harbor. So it incurs significant flooding risks. On top of that, we all know climate change. That makes the situations even more extreme. For instance, Hong Kong was attacked by super typhoons twice, last year and last year. This kind of super typhoons are supposed to come every 50 years. And in terms of the extreme rainfall, it doubled over the past century. Extreme rainfall events mean within an hour, more than 100 mm rainfall. Against this context, we are doing 2 things. Among various anti-flooding measures, we have strategies to tackle the existing older urban areas. At the same time, another one for the new development areas. Firstly, about the existing ones. Among various issues, there are 2 features. One is that, say, to tackle the steep slope around the mid-levels of the mountain, we build hidden drainage tunnels at various locations so that it can intercept the upper hill rainfall runoff and divert them into where it should go. At the same time, at the lower urban areas, we build large, hidden stormwater retention tanks like this, very huge. There are 4 numbers in total in Hong Kong at these strategic locations. They can temporarily store the large amount of stormwater and then discharge them at a later appropriate timing. The story is not only that. For instance, this picture shows the largest of its kind in Hong Kong, located in a district called Happy Valley, because the horse racing ground is located there, making people happier. How to make this infrastructure to be, say, safeguarding people and make people happier is our project. On top of the hidden structure, we make the ground level with more greening, football pitch, and other recreational use. At the same time, we collect those rainwater for beneficial use at a later stage, save water, and also improve the biodiversity. And on top of that, we try to be more creative. For instance, we organize a concert within this structure. People are happy. And at the other location, an artist provide an installation art. So this structure is not only about climate resilience, but make the best use of it for water conservation and other social cultural events. And for new areas, we got more opportunities. And we adopt the state-of-the-art sponge city concept. I think many of you should be aware of the sponge city concept. is to make the area to be with lower flooding risk, more climate resilient, at the same time that we can integrate in the design with promotion of biodiversity and enhance the urban living space. During dry and wet seasons, they can have different features. So the idea is to make it safe and provide urban livable space. Overall, Hong Kong launched the Hong Kong's Climate Action Plan 2030+. It covers various aspects from mitigation, decarbonization, and also adaptation and resilience. It's a 100-page booklet containing all the details about how Hong Kong mitigate climate change, at the same time to invest in adaptation and resilience. We need to protect our people, our children, to make them safe, climate adaptive and resilient, and make them happier. Let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Wong, also for giving us a fantastic proof that when you have certain limitations, in Hong Kong's case, space, then it really stimulates truly innovative thinking. Thank you so much for that. Our last city spotlight takes us to Tel Aviv, Yafo. And Ron Holdai was elected for his 5th consecutive 5-year term. 5th consecutive 5-year term as mayor of Tel Aviv Yafo in 2018. And thanks to his long-term economic vision for Tel Aviv Yafo, the city has positioned itself as a global center of innovation and creativity and has become one of the world's best-known startup cities. Let's now hear from Mayor Holdai on how Tel Aviv Yafo is tackling severe heat and building a more resilient city. You have the floor, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here to talk about the challenges of climate change in my city. Tel Aviv gained recognition as a very vibrant and creative city and one of the most energetic startup hubs in the world, but we, like you, also have many challenges. For today's presentation, I picked the topic of rising temperature. You see how different is the world. 2017 was the hottest summer ever measured. Last year, we had 113 days with temperature over 30 Celsius, 86 Fahrenheit. I don't know about you, but personally, when I face challenge, I look for solutions, so I like to go back to my childhood. Take a look at the screen. Believe it or not, the cute kid with carrots is me. This picture was taken where I was born, a collective farm called kibbutz. My parents were pioneers who wanted to create an utopian society, a community based on sharing where everyone was equal. Today we realize that many of the ideals of this small village also fit large cities. Sharing resources, building community, and promoting solidarity. I call this philosophy kibbutz in the city. For the purpose of today's talk, I wish to focus on the green values of the kibbutz. This is very relevant to my city today, the importance of the natural environment. That is why I dress as a carrot and not as a Batman. When I was growing up, planting trees and creating green spaces was very important. It was part of the ideology of redeeming the land, but it will also create a pleasant place. We did not have an air conditioner and spent most of our time outside. Many of the celebrations and events took place outdoors in areas that enjoy shade and breeze. We did not call it adaptation, but that was exactly what we were doing. Let's fast forward to Tel Aviv 2018. More people and more businesses mean more heat islands. Since 2004, we had to expand city irrigation from 6 months a year to over 9 months. We have many policies that address the infrastructure, building, and resilience. But we also do what my parents did 70 years ago. We plant trees, save and recycle water, and create shade. Here are some examples. When we plan new public projects, we set a shading standard of at least 40%. We partner with the Columbia University to map the city's hotspots. We are creating innovative shading installations by engaging the public and the artistic community. We declared 53 areas in town in urban nature sites. We allocated dozens of community gardens in which children, senior citizens, and families share the work and the vegetables. And we plant trees. As simple as that. A few years ago, the World Economic Forum at MIT created a project called Treepedia to measure the density of greenery in major cities. Try to imagine. Tel Aviv is among the top 20 cities and the only one in the Middle East. The other cities are lucky to be in areas that enjoy a lot of rain. In recent years, we doubled the number of trees in the city by planting 1 new tree every hour. We even have a yearly festival of trees. All children go out to plant trees in the city. To accommodate this ambitious plan in very dry country, we are leading in water saving and recycling. We use smart irrigation. This is the field in which Israel is truly a global leader. Today, the majority of our green spaces is connected to smart irrigation system. This helps us to reduce water usage by more than 40%. We are increasing the usage of recycled water in our parks, and most importantly, we established metropolitan purification facility for wastewater. So today, 80% of our sewage is purified and used for agricultural irrigation in the Israeli desert. It is the largest facility of its type in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as a small kibbutz had an impact on our country, perhaps Tel Aviv can serve as a better site for cool cities. In that sense, I wish to express my appreciation to C40 and its activities. We value the exchange of knowledge and ideas. My friends, I thank you for your attention, and I will end with a lovely idea. As I said, we plant a new tree every hour. So since I began talking and until Vice President Al Gore finished to speak, there will be a new tree in my city. So, in the spirit of the new Jewish year that we celebrated last week, I wish you and your residents a happy, prosperous, and green new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for this last idea. Thank you to Mayor Huldai for sharing the experiences from Tel Aviv, Jaffa. That concludes our 3 spotlight examples for now, and now I'm pleased to introduce a short video made by Plan International for the C40 World Mayors Summit. And the video showcases the reality of living on the front lines of climate change. This is Dhaka, it's called. And this is Dhaka features 19-year-old Sohagi Akhtar, a student in 12th grade at Kilgaon Model College. Sohagi lives in the Kilgaon Malek slum in Dhaka South. The slum is surrounded by a man-made lake, which floods the community during heavy rainfalls and causes waste management issues, as one can imagine. But the situation has improved through joint efforts by Sohagi and other volunteers who have organized to clean up the community. Here is Sohagi's story.
This is Dhaka. This is where I live. It's a city of millions of people. I am Sohagi. This is my home. There are many challenges here. One of them is water. The monsoon is coming every year, but it's falling earlier. It lasts longer and is more unpredictable. Our community is getting waterlogged, sometimes for weeks. Our climate is changing. Drinking water is getting less. We, the next generation, are a part of the solution. We want to be a partner to politicians and policymakers in finding sustainable solutions. The future depends on us. Let's get to work. For us, for Dhaka, for your city, for the planet.
Thank you. Actually, I think Sohaki should be in Copenhagen these days. Sohaki, are you here in the room? I'm not sure, but she's here. Please stand up and let us give you applause for what you're doing. And we have them. Thank you very much. Your dedication to making your community a better and more resilient place and actually doing something about it, that is exactly what is needed. And I'm sure that also all the mayors with the responsibility, they need citizens like you. Our next conversation explores the shared experiences between two women who are each climate leaders. One at the helm of an international organization, and the other a promising climate justice advocate. Now I'd like to welcome up here Mainur Mod Sharif, Executive Director at UN Habitat and Deputy Undersecretary for the United Nations. And joining her on stage will be Sibyl Samuel from Addis Ababa. Sibyl works as the East Africa Communications and Knowledge Management Officer for the CIJA Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security. That's a very easy title, thank you very much. And there she is working on multimedia narratives for climate resilience across East African food systems and livelihoods. Ladies, we're looking forward to your conversation.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and welcome, Sibyl, to the Climate C40 conference. And I'm very happy to be with you here. I can see it can be my daughter. So now it's like daughter and mother conversation in front of all the VVIPs and the important people. Okay, I would like to, you watched the short film just now. I just would like to have your opinion. We saw in the film of Sohagi, yeah, how the impact of climate change affect everyday life in her community in Dhaka, and she's here. And I understand you are a storyteller to yourself, and also storyteller yourself. Can you tell all of us here about yourself, the creative medium that you have used to help tell the story of climate resilience in Addis Ababa? Please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sibyl Samuel. I'm Ethiopian Canadian. I'm a geographer and an environmental justice advocate. And I live in Addis Ababa, which is a city of around 5 million. It struggles with rapid urbanization, transport, waste issues, air quality, and it's also the seat of the African Union and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, so kind of like the diplomatic capital of the continent. What I work on with CCAFS, which is the really long title, CGIAR Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture, Food Security in East Africa, is building narratives for resilient food systems. It's the main livelihood and economy for the region. And I use writing stories, film, photography. I'm also part of Mangad Leso, which means Streets for People in Amharic, Ethiopia's official language, and it's a monthly open streets movement. We close about 15 kilometers in 7 locations of the city and open them exclusively for non-motorized mobility, cycling, skateboarding, walking, running, and just last week we won a spot in the city's 100 feature report in the section of air quality.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And one more.
Now her turn to ask me.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so what is the role of UN Habitat in helping make the most vulnerable communities around the world more resilient and prepared for climate impacts?
Thank you very much, Seble. UN Habitat is formed almost 40 years ago. Its mandate given by the General Assembly or by the member state is to work with a program on human settlement. When you talk about human settlement, we are definitely working with people and communities. And we have 2 aspects. One is on the normative part, building up or designing the tools, the procedures, the policies, and also the monitoring tools and the guidelines. And the other one is to apply and to have a program, a project on the ground. And very much that we are the urban poor and also the communities at the heart, because cities is for the people and peoples are for the cities. Because I was a mayor before, become the ED of UN Habitat for 7 years in Penang. And I know very much the difficulties and the challenges. And just to share a few examples of our work in UN Habitat, I went to Mozambique after the Cyclone Idai, and I've seen the effect of the impact of climate change. And I'm very, very happy to share with you here. I met the president, I met the Minister of Education saying that, Maimunah, can you build more resilient building? I said, why? Of all the buildings, mostly are all collapsed, except the building that is used by your guidelines and funded at that time by World Bank. It still stands. So now I think we have to scale up. Scale up. That is one area that we work together with the community. Second is we also work together with Afghanistan. We have a very big project. Actually, it's funded by the Danish government in Afghanistan and giving this around 650,000 land certificate, land tenure to the people and to the community there, because once they don't have the land tenure, they will be evicted anytime. And then the third is for the one-stop center for the youth. We have around 500,000 youth benefit from that. I can say a lot more, but I think we have only 10 minutes to do this conversation. So I stop there. But another one is we are doing now is the building communities for resilient urban poor. If you want to more detail about that, please come to me. And I have my colleague here, Shipra, and we can discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, my turn to ask you. Well, there are many mayors here. I'm also the former mayor. You can also say to me.
Okay.
What is your message to the mayors? How can they support and engage you as young people around the world? How can the mayors here, the decision makers here, can support you?
Yeah, thank
Please.
you. So I would say to all the mayors that are here and all the mayors that weren't able to come, to try as best as you can to look beyond the confines of your political term or your political agenda and dream even bigger. So support the movements for good that are already happening, empower what exists, ask big questions like what is happening on the ground that I can invest in and multiply and amplify. Never be a barrier and always be a bridge, and engage us meaningfully, not just to tick your youth participation quotas, but actually so we can influence the outcomes of what's going on. And also in places of the world where it's dangerous or not safe to be an environmental activist, to ensure that we're protected and supported. And also to support forums that are places where we can give our voice. So for example, the Lagos Urban Development Initiative, they did a really cool campaign called the Lagos We Want. And it's basically a youth manifesto of the city that they're dreaming about. And I think every city can benefit from having that happen in their territory. So basically, to be an enabler, a facilitator, and an amplifier, I think the biggest asset that we have as young people is we're not yet cynical. And that is an amazing, amazing thing that can be taken to dream even bigger.
You heard that, the young people is not yet to be cynical.
Yeah.
So I hope that is to give you the enabling environment, yeah, for the young people. I'm also talking to reminding myself, no, and also to the mayors. Okay, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. So when you were the mayor of Penang Islands in Malaysia, how did you work with young people to make sure their voices were heard, and how did it enrich your own experience as a city leader?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much, Anne, for inviting me. In your invitation, you asked me to share my experience as a mayor of Penang. I was appointed on the 16th of March 2011. Immediately, I was the first lady mayor in the city. So you can see the challenge that I have to go through. And the first thing is that this one youth always send me an email or WhatsApp almost every day saying that rubbish is not collected, the rain is clogged, the tree is falling, and there's every day, almost every day. I called him, and he told me that his leg was shaking when the mayor called him to the office. I said that, come, don't only complain, let us discuss and how we can work together. And to cut the story short, of course, a few discussion, we managed to come up with a Better Penang apps. They call it Citizen Action Technology. It's developed by the young, developed by the young guy who keep on complaining to me. And we have the Citizen Action Technology. We call it Better Penang app. You can look at the website. It's reduced a lot of expenses to the city because I have a 24/7 information on the ground. I can also check my technician whether they are doing their work or not. And you cannot ask the young people to come to the office, fill in the form and for the complaint form. So they just snap, send up, that's it. And we have the monitoring system. That's how I also work together with them. Second is also in terms of the education. And I used to receive a lot of invitation by the primary school and also kindergarten to launch their maybe a sport day. And my assistant said that, my personal assistant, why you want to go to the sport day for these people, for the young people? I said, that's the time when I give my speech, I put down all my ideas and also my goal for the cities. We start young from the education, that's second. Third, I look into my city was the first city at that time to have a gender-responsive participatory budgeting and gender-responsive participatory planning. So involve everybody, even including the young people. And we have also culture, where we bring in culture because music attracts the young people, yeah? Are you sure?
Yeah,
yes?
We love music.
Yeah, you love music.
As do you.
Yes, so we use, when I use music, I go together with the young people, I feel very young. So I use music, and they use Georgetown Festival, Butterworth Festival, and this is how we can inculcate and we can embark the ideas that the mayors would like to share. At the same time, we're also coming out with many of the activities like car free morning. We have the meeting together with them. So in the gender responsive participatory budgeting and planning, we involve all actors. So we would like to see, at that time, I put out cleaner, greener, safer, healthier, and happier Penang at that time. And they're still going on now to continue. So we only, Selby, we only 3 minutes left. So I think we better go to the next question. I have a long story to tell because 7 years. So involving the youth. So since we have no time, I end up with a principle of 4 Ps, public, private, people partnership, and principle of 3R, rethinking, reduce, reuse, and recycle at that time, and they use until now. Okay, over to you. I have to ask you. Okay, now the sheer scale of the climate crisis can sometimes feel overwhelming. What is actually keep you going? You can do other things other than this more interesting. Why climate change? Why you choose this line? Please tell to the mayors and all the participants here. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, for me, my activism or my organizing or advocacy does not feel like a choice. I think that to do nothing would be to participate in my own demise. And I would like to live. I would like to live well and for the earth to live well and thrive. And for communities to do the same regardless of how much money they earn or where they come from. So that doesn't feel like an option. I think apathy is a choice, and I don't choose it. I choose to be engaged in what I do, and what inspires me is all the young people who are so much more aware than I was in my teens, that are striking from their schools, they're divesting their schools from fossil fuels, and they're embodying the urgency of the crisis in a way that's mobilizing so many millions of people. Also, I'm inspired by connections, so I'm part of the Global Shapers Addis Ababa Hub, and we launched a campaign to ban plastic bags in the country. And when we did that, we brought so many different environmental justice pioneers from the city together. We have universities that are leading composting schemes. There's an organization of deaf people making plastic alternatives. There's the open streets. There's river restoration. And so I think a big thing is going beyond who you think is your conventional ally, and also using stories, because that's how you inspire people beyond your very small niche. So in the open streets, we have artists, we have city officials, and everyone is taking up the streets without cars together. So I think it's also important to celebrate small victories and big victories, and to say once again, we're here in this moment. We're not here to participate in our own destruction. We're here to participate in our survival, and more than that, in thriving.
Oh.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
1 minute.
Very, very inspiring.
Thank you.
And I think all of us here should give another clap to her.
And to you.
And I'm here heading this organization for the past 1.5 years. And with my limited experience as a mayor and as an urban planner, I think all of us here, my colleagues, all the mayors and the decision makers, we want to do something. We want to act now. We already have many declarations. Let's turn it into declare action. Not more declaration, declare action. I think that is important. And second is that we don't have time anymore. We don't know what happened after this next second. So I think whatever that we do, start from now and breathe individually to change ourselves, our behavior, and our pattern of consumption and production, and also to the higher level, change the policy, whatever that is not working. And we have to do a lot of rethinking. I think now, since it's already red, 0.00, otherwise we can have more. But anyway, thank you very much. And I hope that we can get a lot of things from C40. Thank you.
Very good, very good. I don't know about you, I could easily have listened longer to these very energetic women. Thank you so much. And I hope you got the message from Sibyl, who said, dream bigger and look beyond your own term. I thought that was quite a takeaway. So thank you very much for this conversation. And now we come to the last point on the agenda. I wonder how come there are still so many people in the room. Our next and final speaker is a global climate superstar. He has been sounding the alarm on climate change for decades and has inspired millions of people around the world to rally behind the science and take action. And I am, of course, referring to former Vice President of the United States, Al Gore. Al Gore is the co-founder and chairman of Generation Investment Management and the founder and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, a non-profit devoted to solving the climate crisis. Before he was inaugurated as the 45th Vice President of the United States, where he served for 8 years, he served in the US House of Representatives and the US Senate a number of terms. We all know the inconvenient truth, but I don't know how many remember that it actually got 2 Oscars. And in 2007, Al Gore was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize along with the IPCC for informing the world of the dangers posed by climate change. Al, it's a great pleasure and an honor once again to welcome you here in Copenhagen. I know it will be great, but I only have one concern, because the organizers have given you only 10 minutes. I'm so thrilled to see how you'll manage that. Please, welcome. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Connie, for your very warm words and for your outstanding service as the European Commissioner for Climate and in the other positions you have held. I want to also acknowledge with gratitude David Miller, Director of International Diplomacy for the C40, who I knew when he was the mayor of Toronto. And I don't know who's here now and who's not, but I want to acknowledge Eric Garcetti, your incoming chair, who is a wonderful friend, and Hidalgo, your outgoing chair, who is also a wonderful friend, and Mike Bloomberg, who has done such wonderful work with this organization and many others. Steve Mills, you may not know, but he is with me here with the Climate Reality Project. And next month, November 20th, we're having a day-long 24 hours of reality. And as I said to some of the mayors that I met with and talked through some slides with earlier, any city who wants a slideshow on that day, I have personally trained 25,000 men and women who are expert on giving a presentation about the crisis, its solutions, and how to mobilize to implement these solutions. So, 10 minutes, huh? Should be enough to clear my throat. But actually at this point, there are only 3 questions that remain to be discussed where the climate crisis is concerned. Must we change? Can we change? Will we change? I'll present a little bit of evidence to support the answer to each one of those questions. Here's the spoiler alert. This crisis is way worse than almost anyone realizes. It is way worse. And it is getting worse still way more quickly than most people realize. You know, the scientists have done such an amazing job. They're so dedicated. They don't get paid for this. Thousands of them from around the world have just done an incredible job. They are culturally conservative. Not conservative in a political sense, though some of them are, some of them aren't. But when I say culturally conservative, here's what I mean. They don't want to put out a scientific finding until they're absolutely certain they have documented every part of it. And every question that could possibly be asked, they want to make sure they've exhausted every avenue toward an answer. And so sometimes when they will tell you privately, oh my gosh, this is just unfolding as a disaster, they will not put that in in a scientific paper because they can't prove every aspect of it yet. The reason I'm telling you this is partly in an effort to explain why this crisis is so much worse than we, the general public, have generally understood. You know, we're treating the sky as an open sewer. We're putting 142 million tons of man-made heat-trapping global warming pollution into the sky every single day. It stays there on average roughly a century. It builds up over time. The accumulated amount, especially since the end of World War II, with the global economy growing so much in the last 70 years, the accumulated amount of this heat-trapping pollution now traps as much extra heat as would be released by 500,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day in the lower atmosphere. An incredible amount of heat. And that's why the temperatures are going up. But in some ways, that's the least of it, because more than 90% of this extra heat's going into the ocean. And with apologies to Las Vegas, what happens in the ocean doesn't stay in the ocean. It comes back to the land where people mainly live. The majority of people who live in cities live near coasts, by the way, and the sea level rise is one of the second-order consequences. When the oceans warm up as much as we're warming them up, a couple things, well, more than a couple things, but a couple of things happen that are really important. Number one, the storms that come from the ocean to the land get much stronger. You saw perhaps what happened to our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas when Hurricane Dorian had wind speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour for 40 hours at a stretch, just reducing part of that island nation to matchsticks. What a great tragedy. Only 2 years after essentially the same fate struck Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria. 3 weeks before that, Houston, Texas, in my country, had 1.5 meters of rain from Hurricane Harvey. And today, we have a super typhoon Hagibis, I believe is the way you pronounce it, aiming at Tokyo. World Rugby Cup games suspended. That's the least of it. So these ocean-based storms get much stronger. Second consequence of heating up the oceans as much as we're doing is that it disrupts the water cycle on which life depends. The evaporation off the oceans is what feeds the rain over the land, which rushes back to the sea through the rivers. But now we're increasing the amount of water vapor coming off the ocean so much with these extra temperatures. We get rain bombs with enormous amounts of rain falling in a very short period of time, creating floods and mudslides, and so many cities here have gone through this. You know, when I give my slideshow, when I started, I would look for examples of these phenomena that would go back 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Now, I go to last week or yesterday because they're getting worse and they're becoming more frequent. This extra heat's also melting the ice, and so the sea level is rising, and the tropical diseases are moving to the higher latitudes. Dengue fever has become, this year, a major health threat. The Lancet Commission says that the climate crisis is the global health emergency, and there are many reasons for it. It's generating climate refugees. Syria, before the civil war started, had the worst drought in the history of the Eastern Mediterranean, linked to climate. The scientists have pinned it down thoroughly. Other causes of that civil war, but the refugees that came out of Syria destabilized many political systems in Europe. Even Brexit, where the UK is about to shoot itself in both feet, it's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. I'm not a UK citizen, but boy, I don't know why they don't have another referendum, because the people, they realize now, a whole bunch of them, they're not going to vote for that again. But anyway, they were stampeded. Partly the guy who was the main force behind Brexit said the most powerful billboard was one that showed an endless line of refugees from the Middle East and North Africa, with the slogan, "The EU has failed us all." Political disruption. They're now predicting as many as 1 billion climate migrants in this century. My religious faith, my own faith tradition, teaches me to welcome the stranger. My previous career in politics taught me that there are sometimes thresholds beyond which a very large and sudden surge of immigration can trigger the release of populist passions. So I could go on with the list of consequences that illustrate the answer to that first question. Must we change? Yes, we have to change. This is our generation's life or death battle. Think back through the histories of the cities represented here and the nations they are found in, times in the past where heroism made the difference in a crucial battle that defined history. The whole world is facing just those circumstances right now. Is the generation of people alive today made up of moral cowards? Are we really so easily manipulated into lethargic complacency by an organized campaign by polluters purchased and paid for by the polluters who are the principal source of this global warming pollution, to pull the wool over our eyes, to deceive us, to cause us to disbelieve what we can see with our own eyes? I fully realize that in the world of governance, not to mention the world of politics, it is extremely difficult to point over the horizon and ask people to imagine the consequences of the choices we make today, for good or ill. It's difficult. Every mayor here, every close assistant and colleague of a mayor who's been through the Democratic battles and campaigns, you know this at least as well as I do, and most of you better. But there are times in human history where we as human beings have to rise above the limitations of our providence. We have inherited the behaviors and instincts of our ancient ancestors that survived certain kinds of threats. And we react instantly when one of those comes along. And we are vulnerable to greed, we're vulnerable to ego, we're vulnerable to all kinds of human weaknesses and failings. We all know that, we're human beings. But here's what we sometimes forget. We also have the ability, the God-given ability, to rise above those limitations when we see the necessity of doing so. This is such a time. And because so many national leaders have fallen prey to the very skillful and well-financed lobbying and campaign supporting and revolving door flowing special interests that manage in various ways to just seize control of policy. It's one of the reasons why inequality is rising to dangerous levels. Inequality is a little bit like inflation. You're always going to have a little. If you don't, you got another kind of problem. But you always want a little, but you have to avoid at all costs hyperinflation. Ruins everything. Inequality is the same way. Some inequality is a necessary condition for markets to work. People have different levels of skills, and some skills are valued more than others. But when inequality rises to the hyper inequality levels, that threatens both democracy and capitalism. And we're hearing that dialogue now. Too many of our national governments have fallen under the spell of wealthy special interests. Nice people. Very nice. They're trained to be, and they're chosen because they're inherently nice. And you know, most of it's legal. That's the crime. But because so many of our national governments have fallen into this tar pit of special interest influence that keeps things just the way they are when they help those who have enough power to want them that way. I'm sounding a little radical. I'm not, really. I'm just an objective observer in my own mind. But because of what's happened to so many of our national governments, mayors are on the front line now. You don't have the luxury of just hanging out with, now there's some cities that the property developers are pretty influential. I get all that. Okay, but by and large, mayors are closer to the people. You don't have the luxury of just going away and reading reports about what's going on. You run into your constituents every single day. Maybe that's the reason why mayors have been providing such outstanding leadership. A lot of this is up to you. We need you. I'm not here just to give you a speech. I'm here to recruit you. We need your help. The world needs your help. The next generation needs your help. And the young people are saying in ever louder, more poignant, more persuasive, more passionate terms that they depend upon us to do the right thing. Okay, so second question is, can we change? Here's the good news. We have had an absolutely spectacular emergence of new technologies that don't pollute and can replace most of the heavily polluting technologies that have gotten us into this. 5 years ago, before the Paris Agreement, electricity produced by solar and wind was cheaper than electricity produced by new coal and gas plants in 1% of the world. 1%. 5 years later, today, electricity from solar and wind is cheaper than electricity from new fossil fuel plants in 2/3 of the world. 5 years from now, that will be true in 100% of the world. You know, we got used to hearing about how computer chips would come down in cost and keep going down, and mobile phones and, you know, flat screen TVs. That's happened with solar. That's happened with wind. It's happening with batteries. It's happening with electric vehicles. It's happening with efficiency improvements. And we're seeing a farmer-led regenerative agriculture revolution. We're seeing more than 200 major global companies have pledged to go to 100% renewable energy, and many global companies are now pushing the boundaries towards circular manufacturing. Forestry on a sustainable basis is more possible when the new satellites can follow every single individual tree. We're not there yet, but we have the tools that we need. Last year in Europe, if you look at all of the new electricity generation that was installed, How much of it do you think was solar and wind? 88%. 88%. In India, 65%. In China, 53%. In my country, in the US, 49%, almost zero coal. By the way, the famous Coal Museum in Kentucky has just installed solar panels on its roof in order to save money. True story. True story. Electric vehicles have increased 450% in numbers just in the last 4 years, and the drivetrain, the most important part of any car or truck, will drop definitively below the price of the internal combustion engine vehicle's drivetrain within 2 years. This is happening as well. Batteries. So we can do this. We have to do it. We can do it. And as we do it, we can create jobs. Let me tell you another quick story about my country. What's the fastest growing job in the United States of America? Solar installer. For the last 5 years, solar installation jobs have grown 6 times faster than average job growth. What's the second fastest growing job? Wind turbine technician. Can anybody think of an opportunity that exists in every single city represented here that could put millions of people to work in a program that would pay for itself? Retrofitting buildings. 25% of the global warming pollution can be traced to grossly inefficient residential, commercial, and industrial structures, and could be stopped with more insulation, better windows, LED lighting. Why don't we do that? Well, some of you know what's described as the agent principal problem, where one person pays for the building of a structure, and then another person pays the monthly energy bills. The incentives for the builder will be to scrimp on extra insulation or better windows because the bills are going to be paid by somebody else. That's not an impossible problem to solve. One city here, I can't remember, but they figured out how to crack this nut. They have had a 385% return on their investment. So here's what you do. You look forward, again, the problem of looking over the horizon, dealing with the reality we face now in terms of its future dimension. Same thing here. You look out 5 years and you see the sharp decline in energy bills. That's money, those are real savings. All you need is a financial instrument to pull those savings from the future forward into the present and hire the people. And by the way, these jobs can't be outsourced. They're in the community. They're in your cities. There are many similar examples. So we can do this. Final question. Will we do it? Most important of all, I think we will. But honestly, that decision's going to be up to you. I'm encouraged by the global Green New Deal, and I congratulate the C40 organization for coming up with this inspiring initiative. And it connects the solutions to the climate crisis to dealing with inequality and dealing with environmental injustice and dealing with the need for a lot of good new jobs. So I am encouraged. So I need to close. I'm out of time. We're not out of time. We have barely enough time to solve this crisis. What does solving it mean? Some damage has been done. Regrettably, some of the damage that has been done is not recoverable. We have to be honest about that. Regrettably, there will be more damage before we turn the corner. But we still have the ability to prevent the civilization-ending catastrophic harm that the scientists have warned us about. And since the scientists were absolutely 100% right in what they warned us about 20 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago, shouldn't that cause us to pay more attention now to what they're telling us will happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We should listen to them. And we should listen to the inspiring young Greta Thunberg. What a wonderful, clear voice of conscience she is presenting to the world. I believe we will do it. But I will close by repeating what I said before. I really, if I had the ability to transfer from the feelings that I have in my heart to yours, I know it sounds corny, I just don't know how to do it. I try. This is, everything's at risk. And if we decide that this is the moment and we are the ones to solve this crisis, what joy there is in turning your hands to work that justifies pouring every bit of creativity and innovation that mayors are so great at, and energy to solve this crisis. And looking over the horizon one final time, it's not that hard to imagine 40 years from now, the generation that comes of age then, if they live in a dystopian world that is filled with the horrors the scientists are warning us about, if there are 1 billion climate refugees destabilizing governance, leading to a Mad Max kind of governance in some areas of the world, if cities are shut down with no drinking water in many geographies, if droughts are damaging the food supplies and the underground water supplies, if new diseases are ravaging populations, worst of all, if that generation feels despair instead of hope and looks at their own children and feels grief that their lives will be worse still, they would be fully justified in looking back at us in our time and asking, what in the hell were you thinking? How could you have failed to act? Didn't you hear the scientists? Didn't you watch the television news every night with the floods and droughts and all the rest? What were you thinking? Were you watching TV too much? What was it? On the other hand, if that generation finds themselves in a world that is animated by a spirit of renewal and hope and optimism, with all of the polluting activities being displaced by clean, new, efficient technologies that are creating millions of new jobs and filling them with hope, if the air is getting cleaner and air pollution is not as bad and the waters are being cleaned up and they feel hope in their hearts and they look at their children and think, thank God it's going to be better still when they grow up. I want them to look back at us and ask the question, how did you find the moral courage to rise up and say, we're going to do this? Part of the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is that political will is itself a renewable resource, and they will know that in Copenhagen, Denmark, in October of the year 2019, mayors from all over the world came together and decided to get moving and solve this crisis. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is what I call a clearing of the throat. And it's really nice sometimes to really listen to objective observers. Seriously, thank you so much, Al Gore. I think that we are many that are grateful that you are still devoting so much energy to the issue of climate change. There is something fantastic about listening to people who knows what it takes, but who now can speak freely and independently and are doing that in this strong manner. Thank you so much to Al Gore. And then, ladies and gentlemen, this was actually the closing of the plenaries of the first day only, and it ain't even over yet. We have an evening treat for you as well, but I want to thank everyone in the audience here and to viewers around the world, and I hope that they feel like joining us also tomorrow morning, where among our first speakers, we will have the Prime Minister of Denmark and the UN Secretary General, and a whole as interesting program also tomorrow. Right now, what is awaiting you next is the award ceremony out at something called Tab 1. Actually, it means Carlsberg, then you maybe better know where you are heading. But you are encouraged to take the buses. They are already ready out there. Don't sort of talk too much and too long, because I think that the buses, they have been ready to depart from for quite some time. So we wish all the nominees all the best of luck. And my very last comment here today is to ask all the mayors to come up here on stage immediately hereafter in 2 minutes for the family photo to be taken. So have a lovely evening, everybody, and see you tomorrow morning.